Hi Phil, hi Yolanda, hello Lytham Hall, and it's been a long time since we did a video, but I think really this year is going to be so special. I really wanted to try and put a few things together, bring the threads together, and in particular celebrate nature at Lytham Hall. You know, I'm absolutely passionate about education, and the beauty of education is that it's about giving. It's about giving to others so that they can pass on and give that knowledge to other people in the next generations. And that's what I feel is probably one of the best and nicest feelings any human can receive. When we think about humans and we think about trees, we tend to compartmentalise things into plants, animals, microbes, fungi. Let's call it life, let's call it nature. And here at Lytham Hall, my golly, we've got an absolute abundance of it. So probably a good place to start would be for me to think, well, I remember Lytham Hall the first time I saw it in, would you believe, 2011. And the first time I saw bluebells in the spring, again April of 2012. That ignited a sort of rocket, but also a smouldering dragon inside me and made me think, why are there so few bluebells at Lytham Hall? And these were the very ones. At that time, probably about half the size of a tennis court. So what I did, I started to dig them up. That sounds a bit naughty, doesn't it? But I made sure that we planted them close to where they looked to be very happy. And that spread over the years, digging a few up. Then we started to get some more volunteers, digging a lot more up, transplanting them where they looked happy within the 78 acres of Lytham Hall. We then got so many and they did so well, we started collecting the seed pods. And we now sow 500,000 seeds every year. So you won't be surprised to know that we're getting towards 20 acres, 20 football pitches of bluebells here at Lytham Hall. And very often people say, well, what's so special about them? I thought Lytham Hall was all about snowdrops. Well, of course it's about snowdrops, but it's also about the daffodils that we've started to get here, and I'll show you those later. It's also very much about the bluebells that we've spread, the number of bees that now visit. And by the way, these are the English bluebells. It's an amazing fact that half of the native English bluebells, be careful because we strictly believe they were imported, so they're not technically native, just as snowdrops aren't. So imagine that, the native, what we call the English bluebell or the British bluebell, is quite different to the Spanish bluebells that you'll find very close to here in places like Wood. They don't have the same smell, they've got a much wider, broader leaf, and of course they're not quite as useful to our wildlife. You don't have to be a native, of course, to be useful to our wildlife, but the bluebells here are very, very special, and you'll look at those in detail a little bit later. But what I'm so happy about is the depth that we actually now have learned. We have learned about this depth. These bluebells, and you will have heard about the wood wide web, these bluebells under my feet are directly connected to the trees within the woods of Lytham Hall. And not only are they directly connected, those trees quite often are special. So in particular we've got oak trees And the big surprise, the other tree that connects with the bluebells via this most amazing, what they call mycorrhizal fungi networks. And I've got a bit of blue rope here. You've been wondering about that. Why is it blue? Well, we've got bluebells. So we'll represent that fungal, if you like, network. Think about it as the road system. Think about it as your veins. Think about it as your brain. All those amazing, tiny, tiny, tiny little bits of fungi actually connect to the root. So there's a sharing of water, there's a sharing of nutrients. But better than that, not only does the oak share with the bluebell shares with the sycamore tree. The sycamore tree shares with the oak. When the bluebell needs water or nutrients, it can call on those trees, and vice versa. People will tell me, but of course trees lose their leaves, so surely trees are dead in the winter. No. What we see above, we think is life. A millionfold more times complex underneath my feet. It isn't soil, it's a total living biosphere. It's under the ground. It's sometimes called the rhizosphere, where the roots live. This is life, and this is Lytham Hall. Now then, what do we have here? And by the way, before you think that I'm digging up bluebells, which is illegal in terms of taking them away, this is what we do every year with hundreds of thousands of bluebells and daffodils and also the snowdrops, and that's why we've got so many. We horticulturally help nature, but of course nature's quite capable of looking after herself. I want you to just have a very quick look, or a close look really, at the fact that we've got fairly light coloured soil here, and we've got what looks like peat on the top with lots of little threads in it. And underneath that we've got very black but sandy soil. So lots of organic matter from the leaf litter here. Bits of lichen that have rotted down, but mainly the leaves from, remember, the oak trees and particularly the sycamore trees. And within here, and here's the clump of bluebells that almost certainly will have been reproduced by seed. These little flowers will have produced seed pods and then later seeds. And within there, the resting organism, which is the bulb. Now the vital part here is to look at these roots. And these roots look quite fine. Now some of the finest roots on these secondary roots here, these you can hardly see other than through a microscope, are about 1/100th of a human hair. Pretty small, but there's a lot of them. 1,000th of a human hair, or maybe 2,000ths of a human hair, are the fungal mycorrhizae that actually bond with and are part of the bluebell. But off they go through the woods. And this is just one group of them. Off they go through the woods to every sycamore, every oak tree, and almost certainly lots of others. Now it's not just bluebells that does this. Trees do this amongst themselves. In fact, there's now evidence, hard evidence, to show that things like the mother oak tree that produces acorns actually supplies the seedlings that she's produced with water, with nutrients. And even more miraculously, there are probably other plants in the wood that supply her. And sometimes when her leaves fall off, the evergreens supply the deciduous trees because they're still photosynthesizing. This is absolutely unbelievable. And this is why I always say, the more you find out, the more mysteries you have to start researching. So here's our bulb, but notice that that appears to be a single bulb, but there's a little one next to it. And that actually was part of that. And that will eventually form another little one. And slowly but surely, and it is quite slow, this clump will get bigger and bigger and bigger. I'm quite pleased to see that there's some little brambles here, because the more diversity there is, the better the chance of the woodland population being healthy. Sometimes others maybe become weeds and overshadow them, and we do help nature a bit with this. But there are areas, as you know, in Britain where there are vast quantities of bluebells. I only very recently researched and found out that it was sycamore and sycamore and oak that are particularly associated. I will put money on lots of other trees being involved with this symbiotic, if you like, cooperation, society, call it what you will. It works, and it's beyond the dreams of people only 50 years ago. This is amazing. Right, well, here we are. A video at Lytham Hall wouldn't be complete, of course, without talking about the national collections of giant redwood. These are the British national collections. And this redwood is the coastal redwood. Sequoia sempervirens, semper green, virens. Semper is always, so sempervirens is always green. And this one, as you can see, is a beautiful silver colour. This is a cultivar, or a variety, called Philoli. And you can see the new growth. Just look at this new growth that has been continuously growing all the way through the winter, and we'll put something like 1/2 metre on in the coming growing season of 26. So the beauty of this is that it demonstrates that there are different varieties. They're not all the same. The ones that grow in California and all the way up to Oregon on the west coast of America are just absolutely outstanding, and we've talked before about them being the tallest tree in the world, that sort of thing. But they grow really well in our climate because we're very, very nearly a temperate rainforest here, and lots of the west coast of the UK actually is classed as temperate rainforest. And this is what they need. They need the moisture that Lytham provides. So absolutely beautiful, growing very well. We've got a whole avenue or walk of coastal redwoods, and we call it the Coastal Redwood Walk. We've been planting now for several years, and this, as you can imagine, will produce a magnificent spectacle in years to come. The oldest ones in California are thought to be about 2,500 years old maximum. The giant redwood, which we'll look at later, possibly 3,500 years old. So these are babies, seedlings almost, they're just babies, but they've got a long way to go. They're doing extremely well, and of course they're not native, but don't forget, many, many thousands of years they most certainly were present here. The fossil records show that redwoods were distributed over a huge amount of the northern hemisphere. And this is the wonderful thing, of course, about science. It helps to tell us something, and it also helps us to predict and plan, because after all we've got them here so that this is a little bit like a Noah's Ark, but at the same time it's a possibility for experimentation. So we've about 50 different types of coastal redwoods and the giant redwood. The giant redwood grows in a different part of California, and these are the ones that are most massive rather than the tallest trees, but very closely related. Okay, well, this is one called Cantab. Remember the other one was called Philole? This is Cantab, so it's still Sequoia sempervirens, cultivar Cantab. Notice how tiny these leaves are, how compressed the whole shape and organisation is. Look at these beautiful new growths about to burst out. It's quite vigorous, but it's more compact. So being a variety, or technically what we call a cultivar, a cultivated variety, it is well worth growing so that we can show the public. And this is why the National Collection is so important, to try and show the sort of variety that we can have in nature that can then be cultivated by horticulturists and possibly have all sorts of new uses. I haven't mentioned even the medicinal uses, but I can assure you I will do later. Right, so here we are with coastal redwood number 3, so the third cultivar we're looking at. We might look at one more later. And this one is called Loma Prieta Spike. Please don't ask me to explain exactly why. It's quite a long story, but that's the cultivar. It is still Sequoia sempervirens. It's still a coast redwood, but notice this one is weeping, and by golly, look at those beautiful leaves. Imagine what sort of specimen this is going to produce, and think about this 30, 40, 50 years into the future, and yet, you know, in only 2 years this has grown from this height to this height. So actually we're going to see some very nice activity and nice attractive trees here on this coastal redwood walk very, very soon. We're already seeing the difference, and this is my part, if you like. It's the education side that I love so much, and the research that goes with that. So Loma Prieta Spike, quite green, weeping, but still a beautiful, beautiful coastal redwood. I'd like you to think about this one a little, and the first thing you'll probably say is it looks a bit brown. Well, there's the prevailing wind, or here it is, and of course you get a bit of scorch. These things live 3,000 years. They don't mind a bit of scorch, they'll regrow. In fact, this one was planted in 2022, and I can see that that was the level it came to in 2022. The ones we were just looking at were 24. This is 22, and it's grown up to there, and now up to here, and then 26, which is what's happening now, will be its growth. Now this is not a Sequoia sempervirens. This one is the giant redwood, not the coastal redwood. Coastal is the tallest. Giant, Sequoia dendron, is the biggest living organism on Earth. Certainly from a tree point of view. Or animals. And look at it, it's magnificent. What I love about this particular specimen, and we've got 4 of these all planted at the same time from the same nursery, and we're doing comparative measurements. What I love about it is that it's got branches right down to the ground. In years to come, those branches will lie on the ground, they will root, and they will send up new shoots, and they will look like a coronet or a crown around this mother tree. It will be absolutely spectacular. Now you might say, why am I saying this at my late stage of life? I'm saying it for your children. And the reason I'm saying it is because 53 years ago, I planted some at Myerscough, which is 70 feet tall now. And they're lying on the ground and they're beginning to root. And again, they'll start to coronet, as they call it. Absolutely wonderful. And so this is National Collection, Lytham Hall, number 2. Sequoiadendron giganteum. Doing fine, doing fine. Okay, Phil, well, here we are, and many people, of course, will know this tree. This is the Clifton Oak. And the Clifton Oak is, we think, about 300 years old. I don't think we've anything older than 300 years on the Clifton estate. But this has been measured and that's what we've calculated. But there's something very special about the Clifton Oak, and there's something very special about all trees. This is physics, really. This isn't witchcraft or anything. What I'm about to say is quite an interesting point. If you imagine, a bit like a lightning strike, that there are different charges up in the sky and the Earth is the opposite of that charge. We know charges attract, don't they? Mm-hmm. We do. And those charges that attract, of course, mean that flowing down through this tree, acting like a lightning rod, is electricity. That electricity, if I put my hand here and Yolanda's hand, is actually short-circuiting that through our bodies into the ground. What that does is it charges any liquid as it goes through, and any particles in our body, and as it charges those, because they have got the same charge, they repel each other. Just imagine what's happening with your blood corpuscles. And if you want to read more about that, just have a Google, look at blood corpuscles, trees and electricity, because that happens. And think about it, if they're all being repelled, maybe they won't clot as easily. At the same time, the tree, as it's coming into leaf now, will produce a most amazing cocktail of chemicals, mainly to make sure that it doesn't get attacked by animals or possibly by diseases. These are called phytoncides. It might also be attracting things like pollinating insects or bats. It could be doing an awful lot. But those phytoncides have a very interesting effect on humans. Certain ones of them will actually cause you to have a reduction in the fight or flight hormones in your body. Things like adrenaline, for instance. The automatic side effect of that is that you become calm. You're not expecting a bear to jump out at you. You don't need to run away. You start to relax. And therefore, being with trees, and particularly touching trees, does have a scientific, measurable, positive effect. But that's not the end of the story, because some other phytoncides that are at work a lot of the time in forests and woods actually boost your immune system. And what that does, it helps your immune system, things like your lymphocytes and so on, to be much stronger in the way they fight disease. Now again, 50 years ago this would have been called witchcraft. Now it's hot science. Look it up, check it, but much more importantly, go for a walk in the woods. Stop felling trees everywhere in our towns, in our cities where we really need them, and think about the big picture. Earth, life, and how long it's going to continue. Right, well, I couldn't walk past this area in front of the hall because it's probably one of the nicest areas that has been, if you like, in flower for the last 4 weeks. This is the wild daffodils. So we think about the snowdrops that everybody comes for, followed by these wild daffodils, and now we're just getting into bluebell season. I can assure you, if you come over the next 6 weeks, the bluebells will be magnificent. Absolutely better than they've ever been because of the numbers. But why are we stopping here when the daffodils are finished? Well, I need to show you something. These wild daffodils, as these aren't cultivated ones, they actually get pollinated and they produce seed pods. The seed pods, there's a small one and here's a much larger one, contain about 80 seeds each. And what tends to happen, remember I talked about transplanting bulbs before, these seeds produce seedlings which in about 3 to 4 years will produce flowering bulbs. And there's this beautiful narcissus pseudo-narcissus, the wild British, actually English strictly, bluebell. There's also one in Wales, the Tenby daffodil. What you might think here is tall grass, and it's hard for my eyes, never mind a camera, to differentiate. What you might think is just tall grass here are seedlings. Every year I've been saving these seeds and chucking them into or around the area where they're planted. This year we're going to go absolutely crazy and we're going to start digging some of these up, sprinkling them in the bare areas between the clusters, because we planted 10,000 of these the first year. And that was way back 2016, as I remember. 2016, thousands of them. 10,000, of course, because of the Wordsworth poem. The next year we planted another 10,000. Now, a bit like the bluebells, we've got so many producing so much seed, we're going to collect seed and we're going to colonise the whole of this triangle leading up to the hall, all the way to the parterre and the South Prospect garden. So we'll be producing probably 10 times the number. And they've gone from that 20,000 to at least 80,000 already. And if I just put my hand across there, everything I'm touching is a seedling of Narcissus, pseudo-narcissus. In years to come, possibly next year, probably the year after, they'll be like this. And this will be so dense that it'll look a little bit like a park bed. So we want it to look more like a parkland. And there we are. So here we are. You're probably getting the message now. This one is yet another of our wonderful coastal redwoods, the Sequoia sempervirens. It's one called High Ranch Blue. Now, because we are the National Collection holders, as a curator, you have this basic idea that you can recognise ones that appear to be very, very special. And so the team here at Lytham Hall have always looked at High Ranch Blue, which has never really been an accepted cultivar. In other words, it's not recognised by the botanists at the RHS. We recognised it as being exceptional, and we've been, if you like, making a case for this to go onto the national list, and even better onto the international list of recognised names of conifer cultivars. And I'm very pleased to say that after a few years of study and a few years of suggesting how good this is and explaining that in a lot of detail, it's a very, very vigorous but very, very beautiful cultivar. I'm glad to say that it's now been accepted by the RHS, and not only that, but to celebrate the fact it's been accepted here in the National Collection, it's been planted at Wisley Gardens. And that's just an amazing accolade, and it demonstrates a little bit more about the value of having a national collection. It's bringing a lot of visitors here, it's bringing botanists from all over the world here. And what we also hope is it will improve horticulture for each and every one of us in our gardens. Obviously, this particular cultivar is a bit big for some gardens, but what we can also find is there are some dwarfer forms that do not take up 380 feet of sky space. That's the beauty of having varieties. Right, well, we've talked about how popular Lytham Hall is, and by golly it is. I can remember when there was a target of 10,000 visitors a year, way back in 2011. And I think to myself now, well, with 260,000 people a year, it means that Lytham Hall becomes sustainable. And of course the contribution from not just the local community, but the Northwest and in fact the national community. And with all our other contacts, it's becoming international. So all sorts of things are happening at Lytham Hall. But the one thing that I notice, and we see it everywhere of course, is that there's a bit of a downside if people walk anywhere in the woods. And there's a perfect example here. This used to be a diamond shape, beautiful, fairly natural looking woodland full of the most amazing snowdrops. And actually this snowdrop population is different from all the others at Lytham Hall. So I really have it in my heart as something very special. It's always the last to flower. So I said to myself the other day, what is going on? And I was appalled when I saw that people were just walking straight through the middle. That should be solid snowdrops. If you look closely, you'll see that they're still there. The bulbs are under the ground. The poor leaves that have been trampled on are slowly dying. They won't die this year, but probably next year and definitely by the year after. Not only will there be a path through there, but it'll start looking like this path through here. 3 times as wide. And then eventually they'll just go. We'll lose it. People will start talking about the desert in parts of Lytham Hall. Now, I feel a huge responsibility for that, because the more videos we do, the more people want to come and see these beautiful things, and the more we need to think ahead as to how we might guide people into areas that they wouldn't know contain things like the bluebells or the snowdrops. And it's something we're working on very, very much this year. And you might say, well, there's an ugly scene with all this tape, but what this tape actually shows is the route of where we're going to put what they call a dry hedge. So imagine a hedge made out of all the trimmings from the shrubs and the trees, and probably only about 600 millimetres high, 2 feet, that sort of thing, perhaps a little more. And the whole idea of that is if we pack it densely, it's a beautiful place for nature. Birds can live there, insects can live there, and the whole thing starts to revitalise the woodland. It also means that a lot of the waste material here at Lytham Hall will be recycled, because the ultimate is that they will be returned to the soil in this area, just as we looked at when we looked at bluebells and we looked at that peaty layer. In parts of the woods here, that peaty layer is 500 years old. Imagine digging it all up and throwing it away, which is what people have done in years gone by in so many parts of the world. In Canada, for instance, in the forests where they're clear felling, there are 1,000 or 3,000-year-old beds being dug up with the clear felling, and the forest dies. Here, we're making sure that we can keep the cycle going, and we can help to tell people about it. As I've said before, if we can get the education going and get people to go and read things, look up Suzanne Simard from Canada, the professor who deals with this sort of thing, and you will learn something. And I can guarantee, if you read her latest book, When the Forest Breathes, it will make you think differently. I guarantee it. So we're doing our little bit here. I thought I'd show you this because several members of the public, particularly our regulars, have said, isn't it awful that people are walking straight through the snowdrops? Well, yes, but we need to show them the snowdrops in order to help and to give this whole place the sustainability it requires so that we can open our gates and welcome the community in. It's not a rant, it's a gentle thought I would like you to absorb for a while. Thank you very, very much. Well, we've looked at quite a lot today, really, and I think it's important that we just come back to the idea of what we're going to see that's going to be so dramatic in the near future. And of course, it has to be the bluebells. The bluebells that I'm standing next to now, we started planting and seed sowing in somewhere around about 2015-16 was the major planting. And shortly afterwards, towards COVID time, we decided to make a woodland walk through here because it was all brambles in places, and we'd cleared some areas to put the bluebells in. If you look now, you'll see that there are brambles in the distance, but there are bluebells going all the way to the golf course in the far distance over there. And there's acres and acres. And if we just go back to the point that I started at, 2011, 2012, when I first saw the bluebells in flower, we had then a mere, quarter of an acre maybe, and we also had a bluebell wood down the road. But as a result of that, we now have something like 20 acres, 20 football pitches of this beautiful blue flower. Imagine the number of bees that succeed. And for everybody that says, I don't like sycamores, come to Lytham Hall, have a look at the bluebells, and just remember, those are inextricably linked, and without one, the other would not be doing as well as they are today. And here we are. Do visit, do come and see them, because if you think 9 million snowdrops looks good, come and see 100 million bluebells. Look at the bees, think of nature, and just be positive, because nature is. Thank you.